On November 14, 1944, Private First Class Robert Chen crouched in a waterlogged foxhole 400 yards from German positions near Hürtgen Forest, Germany, staring at a gold wedding band he'd found in the mud beside a dead Wehrmacht soldier. The inscription inside read, Meine Liebe, March 6, 1938, My Love, June 3, 1938. 6 years married. The German's body lay face down 15 feet away, half buried in autumn leaves and dirt thrown up by American artillery. His left hand was gone. 23 years old. Second-generation Chinese-American from San Francisco. Chen had been in combat for 87 days since landing at Omaha Beach. The 28th Infantry Division had fought through Normandy, across France, into Belgium, now into Germany itself. Every day the same. Advance through forest. Take casualties. Dig in. Hold against counterattack. Advance again. The Hürtgen was worse than anything before it. The forest consumed men. Dense canopy blocked air support. Artillery shells burst in treetops and sent jagged wood splinters down like grenades. Soldiers died from trees as much as bullets. Chen's platoon had started with 42 men on September 19 when they entered the forest. Now they were down to 19. Some killed. Some wounded and evacuated. Some simply gone, lost in the dense undergrowth during night fighting. The survivors were exhausted. Cold. Wet. The November rain never stopped. Everything was mud and blood and the smell of pine sap mixed with cordite. The smell stuck in your nose. In your throat. You tasted it with every meal from the ration cans. The German soldiers were 400 yards away through thick forest undergrowth. You couldn't see them. Couldn't hear them most of the time. Just knew they were there because periodically they fired mortars that crashed through the canopy or sent machine gun bursts when someone moved carelessly. The Americans fired back the same way. Blind. Hoping to hit something. Usually hitting nothing but trees. Neither side advanced. Neither side retreated. They just sat in the mud and killed each other slowly, methodically, without purpose or progress. Command said they were pushing toward the Roar River. To the men in the foxholes, they were pushing toward nothing. Just dying in place. Chen had killed 11 German soldiers since landing in France. He knew the exact number because he counted. Not from pride. From something else. A need to remember. To acknowledge each one. The first 3 at Normandy, for during the breakout from St. Lo, 2 in Belgium, 2 in the Hürtgen. He'd seen their faces. All of them. Even the ones at distance through his rifle sights. He remembered details. One wore glasses. One had blonde hair like wheat. One looked barely 15 years old. One screamed for his mother as he died. One didn't make any sound at all. Just looked surprised. The 11th German had come at dawn 2 days earlier during a probe of American positions. 6 Wehrmacht soldiers had advanced through morning fog, trying to find weak points in the line. Chen's squad opened fire at 30 yards. The firefight lasted 90 seconds. 4 Germans died. 2 retreated. Chen shot one of the dead, a clean shot through the chest. The German fell immediately, didn't get back up. His name was Friedrich Hartmann. Chen knew this because he'd searched the body for intelligence. Found paybook, letters, photographs. A wife named Katrin. 2 children, boy and girl. The photographs showed them in summer dresses in what looked like a garden. Smiling. Normal. The letters were tender, ordinary. Talk about rationing. About neighbors. About missing him. About praying he'd come home safe. Chen left the letters and photographs on the body. He didn't read German well enough to understand everything. Didn't want to. But he took the wedding ring because it was in the mud beside the body, not on the finger. Must have fallen off during the fighting or after. And something in him couldn't leave it there to be trampled into the earth and forgotten. So he picked it up. Wiped the mud off. Read the inscription. Put it in his pocket. That was 2 days ago. He'd been carrying it since, feeling the weight of it every time he moved. 11 grams of gold. It felt like more. Private James Novak shared the foxhole with Chen. 21 years old. Polish Catholic from Pittsburgh. They'd been fighting together since Normandy. Good soldier. Steady under fire. Didn't panic. Didn't freeze. Did his job. He'd seen Chen pick up the ring. Hadn't said anything about it at the time. But that night, while they took turns on watch, he'd asked about it. Chen showed him. Explained about the inscription. The date. What it meant. Novak held the ring up to moonlight, examined the inscription, handed it back. Said nothing for 5 minutes. Then asked a simple question that changed everything. You gonna try to send it back? Chen had been asking himself the same question for 2 days. The logical answer was no. Impossible. They were in active combat. The German line was 400 yards away through forest that both sides had seeded with mines. Anyone trying to cross would be shot immediately by nervous sentries. Even if someone made it across without being killed, the Germans would assume it was a trick. A ruse. They'd shoot the messenger. Or capture him for interrogation. Or both. There was no safe way to return a wedding ring across a front line where men killed each other daily. The smart thing was to keep it. Or throw it away. Forget about it. But Chen couldn't do that. He thought about Katrin Hartmann reading letters her husband would never write again. About 2 children who would grow up without a father. About a wedding ring lost in German forest mud. About the small weight of 11 grams of gold and what it represented. 6 years of marriage. A promise made. A life interrupted. The ring was all that remained. The only physical object connecting a dead man to the people who'd loved him. Throwing it away felt like erasing him completely. Like Friedrich Hartmann had never existed. Never married. Never loved. Never mattered. Chen couldn't do that. Not to the man he'd killed. Not to the widow. Not to himself. So he told Novak yes. He was going to try to send it back. Somehow. He didn't know how yet. But he would figure it out. Novak didn't argue. Didn't call him crazy. Just nodded. Said he'd help. Said it was the right thing to do. That night they discussed options. None were good. They could try to push a note through with a prisoner exchange, but their sector hadn't had prisoner exchanges in weeks. Both sides just killed anyone they caught. Could try radio contact through headquarters, but that would take weeks of bureaucratic channels and probably get lost. Could try to cross no man's land under flag of truce, but that required command authorization which they'd never get. Every option had problems. None seemed possible. But they kept talking. Kept thinking. Because doing nothing wasn't acceptable anymore. By morning they decided on a plan. Reckless. Probably stupid. Likely to get them killed. But possible. Just barely possible. They would wait for the next artillery exchange. When both sides were firing and the forest was chaos with shells landing everywhere, they would move forward through the American line, across no man's land, get as close to German positions as possible, then throw a weighted package with the ring and a note across the final distance. The Germans wouldn't expect anyone moving forward during artillery fire. They'd be in their holes waiting for it to stop. The noise would cover any sounds. The smoke would provide concealment. It might work. Or it might get them killed by their own side, by German sentries, by random shell fragments, by mines. 50 ways to die. One way to succeed. But it was better than nothing. They needed 3 things. First, waterproof material to wrap the ring and protect the note. Second, weight to make the package throwable. Third, the actual note explaining what they were doing. Chen handled the note. He had pencil and paper from his last letter home. He wrote carefully in the dim light of the foxhole. Kept it simple. German was his 3rd language after English and Cantonese, learned from a girlfriend before the war. Grammar wasn't perfect, but the words were clear. To the family of Friedrich Hartmann, Wehrmacht soldier. This ring was found after fighting near Hürtgen Forest. We believe he would want you to have it. We are sorry for your loss. American soldiers. No names. No unit numbers. Nothing that could identify them if the package was found by German military instead of reaching the family. Just the facts. The ring. The reason. The apology. 63 words. It took Chen 20 minutes to write them. He revised 3 times. Changed words. Made sure the meaning was exact. When he finished, he folded the paper carefully and showed it to Novak. Novak couldn't read German, but he nodded anyway. Said it looked right. Said Hartmann's family would appreciate it. If they ever got it. That was the question neither of them could answer. Even if the plan worked, even if the package reached German lines, there was no guarantee it would be forwarded. Might be thrown away. Might be kept as souvenirs. Might disappear into military bureaucracy and never reach Katrin Hartmann in whatever German town she lived in. But trying was better than not trying. That much they knew. For waterproofing, they used an empty C-ration tin. Cut it open with a knife. Folded it around the ring and note. Created a makeshift envelope. Not elegant, but functional. Water wouldn't get through tin. For weight, they attached a rock. Found one the right size in the foxhole. Baseball-sized. ½ pound. Tied it to the tin package with bootlace. The final object looked crude. Homemade. But it was balanced. Throwable. Chen tested the weight in his hand. He could throw it 30 yards easily. Maybe 40 if needed. That would be enough. They just needed to get within 50 yards of German positions. Close enough to throw. Far enough to retreat if things went wrong. The waiting was hardest. They needed artillery fire to provide cover. But artillery came on its own schedule. Sometimes German fire came without warning. Sometimes American guns responded. Sometimes both sides were quiet for hours. You couldn't predict it. Couldn't request it. Just had to wait and be ready. Chen kept the package in his left cargo pocket. The ring, the note, the tin, the rock, the bootlace. Total weight maybe 12 ounces. But it felt heavier. Every time he moved, he felt it pressing against his leg. Reminding him of what he was planning. Of the risk he was taking. Of the man he'd killed and the promise he was trying to keep to a widow he'd never meet. 3 days passed. Normal routine. Take watch. Sleep when possible. Eat C-rations. Clean weapons. Wait. The German line stayed quiet. The American line stayed quiet. No artillery. No probes. Just rain and cold and the endless tension of knowing the enemy was close but unseen. Other soldiers in the platoon noticed Chen and Novak acting different. Checking gear more frequently. Whispering together during quiet moments. Sergeant Dixon asked if something was wrong. Chen said no. Said they were just nervous. Said the waiting was getting to them. Dixon accepted this. Everyone was nervous. Everyone was affected by the waiting. It was normal. So he didn't push. Didn't investigate. Just told them to stay sharp and moved on to check other foxholes. On November 17th, the artillery came. Started at 1,430 hours. German guns first. Big shells landing in American positions. 150 mm artillery. The kind that make craters 6 feet deep. The forest shook. Trees splintered. Dirt and wood fragments rained down. American guns responded within 2 minutes. Counter-battery fire. 105 mm shells arcing back toward German positions. The exchange lasted 18 minutes. Longest barrage Chen and Novak had experienced in the Hürtgen. Usually artillery lasted 5 or 6 minutes. Quick strikes. This was sustained. Both sides dumping shells back and forth. The forest became hell. Noise so loud you couldn't think. Ground shaking with each impact. The smell of high explosive and shattered pine. Smoke everywhere reducing visibility to 20 feet. Chen and Novak didn't wait. They grabbed rifles, checked that the package was secure, climbed out of the foxhole. The other soldiers in their squad were pressed deep in their holes, heads down, waiting for the barrage to stop. Nobody saw them leave. Nobody would notice they were gone until the firing stopped and roll call happened. By then they'd be back. Or they'd be dead. Either way, it wouldn't matter. They moved forward through American positions. Bent low. Fast but careful. The artillery had created gaps in the defensive line. Soldiers were focused on not dying. Not on watching for infiltrators. Chen and Novak passed through easily. 30 seconds and they were beyond friendly lines. In no man's land. The space between armies where nothing lived but fear and death. The forest here was destroyed. Shell craters everywhere. Fallen trees. Mud churned into soup. The smell was worse. More explosive. More smoke. Less pine. They moved from crater to crater. Using them for cover. Artillery was still falling. German shells landing behind them in American positions. American shells passing overhead toward German lines. The sound was continuous. Like standing next to a freight train. Deafening. Disorienting. Perfect cover. 200 yards forward. Still no German sentries visible. The smoke was too thick. The artillery too loud. They kept moving. Crater to crater. Tree to fallen tree. Slow progress but steady. Chen's heart hammered. Not from exertion. From fear. Pure simple fear that any second would bring a bullet or a shell fragment or a mine. But he kept moving because stopping meant failure. And failure meant Friedrich Hartmann's wedding ring stayed lost. Meant Katrin Hartmann never knew her husband had been found. Never got the one piece of him that remained. That was unacceptable. So he moved forward despite the fear. Novak followed 6 feet behind. Same fear. Same determination. 300 yards from American lines. 100 yards from German positions. Close enough. They found a large crater. 8 feet wide. 4 feet deep. Recent. From the current barrage. The earth was still warm from the explosion. They dropped into it. Caught their breath. Chen pulled the package from his pocket. Unwrapped the bootlace from around the rock. Held the makeshift projectile in his right hand. Tested the weight one final time. This was it. No practice throws. One chance. If he threw short, the package would land in no man's land where neither side could retrieve it. If he threw too far, it might hit a tree or land in a German position where it would be found during the barrage and possibly destroyed. He needed to throw exactly far enough. To a spot where German soldiers would find it after the artillery stopped. When they came out to check for casualties and damage. That meant 40 yards. Into smoke. Toward an enemy he couldn't see. Chen stood up in the crater. Exposed himself above the rim. Novak grabbed his belt to steady him. The artillery was still falling but less frequently now. The barrage was ending. They had maybe 2 minutes before the forest went quiet and German sentries resumed watching. Chen wound up. Threw hard. The package arced through smoke and falling rain. Disappeared into gray. He didn't see where it landed. Didn't hear impact over the artillery. Just threw and trusted physics and luck and whatever God might be listening to men in foxholes. Then they ran. Back toward American lines. Fast as possible through mud and craters. Behind them the artillery stopped. Sudden silence more shocking than the noise. Their footsteps sounded impossibly loud. Their breathing sounded like sirens. Any second Chen expected to hear German voices. Or gunshots. Or both. But the forest stayed quiet. They ran past the 200-yard point. Past destroyed trees they'd used for cover on the way forward. Past shell craters still smoking. At 150 yards they heard American voices calling out. Someone yelling, "Who's there?" They shouted back. Friendlies. Chen and Novak. Don't shoot. Rifle bolts clicked. Ready to fire. But nobody shot. They crashed through the last line of undergrowth and fell into their squad's position. Sergeant Dixon grabbed Chen by the collar. Demanded explanation. Where the hell had they been? Why did they leave position during artillery barrage? Were they insane? Chen couldn't answer. Didn't have air in his lungs for words. Just gasped and nodded and let Dixon yell. After 2 minutes the sergeant gave up. Told them both they were on report. Told them they'd be talking to the lieutenant. Told them to get back in their foxhole and stay there. They complied. Dropped into the mud. Lay there breathing hard. Mission accomplished. Package delivered. Whether it reached Friedrich Hartmann's family was now beyond their control. They'd done everything they could. Everything possible given the circumstances. If it worked, Katrin Hartmann would receive her husband's wedding ring. If it didn't, at least they'd tried. That had to be enough. Because nothing else was possible. The German line stayed quiet for 30 minutes after the barrage ended. Normal procedure. Both sides waited after artillery to ensure it was really finished. To check casualties. To assess damage. Chen and Novak sat in their foxhole trying to act normal. Trying not to think about what they'd just done. But it was impossible not to think about it. The package was out there. Somewhere in no man's land near German positions. Maybe already found. Maybe still sitting in mud waiting to be discovered. Maybe destroyed by a boot or a shell fragment. No way to know. Just wait. And wonder. And hope. Sergeant Dixon came back 40 minutes later. His face was different. Less angry. More confused. He told Chen to come with him. Alone. Chen looked at Novak. Novak shrugged. No idea what this was about. Chen climbed out of the foxhole and followed Dixon through American positions to a command post 20 yards back. Lieutenant Harrison was there. Company commander. 26 years old. West Point graduate. Good officer. Respected by the men. He looked at Chen for a long moment without speaking. Then he asked a simple question. Private Chen. Did you throw something across into German lines approximately 1 hour ago? Chen's stomach dropped. They knew. Somehow they knew. Which meant either someone had seen them. Or the Germans had responded. Neither was good. He considered lying. Saying no. But Harrison wasn't asking because he was guessing. He was asking because he had information. So Chen told the truth. Yes, sir. I threw a package across. What was in the package? A wedding ring, sir. Belonged to a German soldier killed 3 days ago. And a note explaining that we wanted his family to have it. Harrison stared at him. Sergeant Dixon stared at him. Neither spoke for 15 seconds. Then Harrison started laughing. Not mockery. Not anger. Just genuine surprised laughter. He laughed for maybe 20 seconds. Then stopped. Composed himself. Looked at Chen with an expression that was half admiration, half disbelief. Private Chen, you just caused the first voluntary communication between American and German forces in this sector in 6 weeks. The Germans sent a note back. On the same tin you threw. I was about to report it to battalion as possible intelligence when I had one of our German-speaking sergeants translate it. Do you know what it says? Chen shook his head. Had no idea. Hadn't expected response at all. Harrison pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. The same Ration tin Chen had used. Now bent and dirty but still recognizable. On it, written in pencil in English, were 9 words. Thank you. We will send it to his wife. German soldiers. Chen read the note 3 times. Couldn't believe it. The package had been found. Had been read. Had been understood. And instead of being thrown away or ignored, German soldiers on the other side of no man's land had taken time during active combat to acknowledge it. To confirm they would do what Chen had asked. To thank him. It was impossible. It made no sense. But it was real. The note was in his hand. The words were clear. German soldiers had responded to an act of compassion with compassion of their own. Harrison let him read it in silence. Then took the note back. Folded it carefully. Put it in his pocket. When he spoke again, his voice was serious. Private Chen, what you did was unauthorized, reckless, and violated about 15 different regulations. You left your position during combat. You crossed into no man's land without orders. You initiated contact with the enemy without clearance. Under normal circumstances, I should court-martial you. He paused. Let that sink in. Then continued. But these aren't normal circumstances. What you did was also decent, human, and represents the kind of character that makes me proud to serve alongside you. So here's what's going to happen. This incident is not going in any official report. I'm not telling battalion. I'm not telling company. As far as the army is concerned, nothing happened. Do you understand? Chen nodded. Yes, sir. But Private Chen, if you ever do something like this again without authorization, I will personally see you busted down to private and assigned to latrine duty for the duration of the war. Am I clear? Yes, sir. Good. Get back to your foxhole. And Chen. Harrison looked at him with something that might have been respect. What you did mattered. Remember that. Now get out of here before I change my mind. Unteroffizier Klaus Becker found the package at 1520 hours on November 17 while checking his section of the German defensive line after American artillery had stopped falling. 31 years old. Wehrmacht infantry. Married. 2 children. 8 years military service. He'd been fighting since Poland in 1939. Seen the victory parades in Paris. Seen the disaster at Stalingrad. Seen friends die in every country between Berlin and Moscow. Now he was in German forest defending German soil against American soldiers who were slowly, methodically destroying his unit. The 275th Infantry Division had been in the Hürtgen for 6 weeks. Started with 6,800 men. Now down to 2,100 effectives. The rest dead, wounded, missing, or too shell-shocked to fight. The Americans called this place a forest. Germans called it a graveyard. Both were right. The trees died faster than men but not by much. Every day the same. American artillery at random intervals. American probes testing defenses. German mortars in response. German machine gun fire keeping Americans pinned. Nobody gained ground. Nobody retreated. Just death on payment plan. Installments paid daily in blood. Becker commanded a squad of 9 men. 5 original members left. For replacements who'd arrived last week. 2 young. No experience. One was 17 years old. Looked 15. Still believed in victory. Still thought the Wehrmacht would push the Americans back. Becker didn't argue with him. Let him believe. Belief kept soldiers fighting. Reality crushed them. Better to delay reality as long as possible. The war was lost. Had been lost since Normandy. Maybe since Kursk. Maybe since Stalingrad. Certainly now. The Americans had endless men, endless equipment, endless artillery shells. Germany had exhausted soldiers defending dirt they'd conquered years ago and would lose next week. But orders were to hold. So they held. And died holding. That was the job. The package lay 20 meters from his foxhole position. Small object partially buried in mud. Metal glinted in rain-filtered light. Becker approached carefully. Mines were everywhere. Both German and American. Planted randomly during nighttime raids. You never knew where they were until someone stepped on one. He'd lost 2 men that way last month. Blown apart by their own mines laid by other German units who hadn't bothered marking locations. But this object was too small for a mine. Wrong shape. He knelt beside it. Picked it up. A C-ration tin folded around something. American origin. That was clear from the English text on the metal. But what was inside? He opened it carefully. Half-expected grenade or small explosive. American tricks sometimes. But no resistance. No click. Just paper and something wrapped in cloth. He unwrapped it. Found a gold wedding ring. Held it up. Read the inscription. Meine Liebe, March 6, 1938. German words. Someone's wedding ring. But whose? And why was it here in an American tin? He unfolded the paper. Read the note written in careful German. The grammar wasn't perfect. Third language German. But the meaning was clear. Friedrich Hartmann. His ring. Found after fighting. Americans wanted family to have it. Sorry for your loss. Becker sat down heavily in mud. Didn't care about getting wet. Didn't care about anything except what he was holding. He knew Friedrich Hartmann. Not well. But knew him. Hartmann had been in Baker Company, 2nd Platoon. Different unit but same division. They'd spoken twice. Once at Field Kitchen 3 weeks ago. Once during reorganization after heavy casualties. Young soldier. Maybe 23. Quiet. Competent. Married recently according to the letters he'd read during mail call. Wife in Bavaria. Talked about her constantly. Showed photographs to anyone who'd listen. Proud. Hopeful. Already planning what they'd do after the war. Hartmann had died 5 days ago during American probe. Becker had heard about it. 6-man patrol sent to test American lines. Only one returned. The others killed or missing. Hartmann was listed as missing, presumed dead. No body recovered. That was common. The forest consumed bodies. Buried them in mud and leaves. By spring they'd be gone completely. Absorbed into earth. Forgotten except by families who waited for letters that would never come. But here was proof. Hartmann's ring. Which meant Hartmann was dead. And American soldiers had found him. Had taken time to retrieve his ring. Had risked themselves to throw it back across the line. Had written a note apologizing for his death. Becker couldn't process it. Made no sense within the logic of war. You didn't apologize to the enemy. Didn't treat their dead with respect. Didn't go out of your way to return personal effects. You killed them efficiently and moved forward. That was warfare. But American soldiers had done something different. Had recognized Friedrich Hartmann not as an enemy but as a human being. A husband. Someone loved. Someone missed. Someone whose death mattered. And they'd taken risk to acknowledge that. To honor it. To do what was right despite the insanity surrounding them. Becker called his sergeant over. Feldwebel Schmidt. 42 years old. Career soldier. Survived Russia. Survived France. Survived 6 weeks in Hürtgen. Hard man. Not cruel but realistic. He'd seen too much to be surprised by anything. But when Becker showed him the ring and the note, Schmidt's face changed. The hardness cracked. Something human showed through. He read the note twice. Held the ring up to examine the inscription. Then looked at Becker. The Americans did this? Unteroffizier Klaus Becker found the package at 1520 hours on November 17 while checking his section of the German defensive line after American artillery had stopped falling. 31 years old. Wehrmacht infantry. Married. 2 children. 8 years military service. He'd been fighting since Poland in 1939. Seen the victory parades in Paris. Seen the disaster at Stalingrad. Seen friends die in every country between Berlin and Moscow. Now he was in German forest defending German soil against American soldiers who were slowly, methodically destroying his unit. The 275th Infantry Division had been in the Hürtgen for 6 weeks. Started with 6,800 men. Now down to 2,100 effectives. The rest dead, wounded, missing, or too shell-shocked to fight. The Americans called this place a forest. Germans called it a graveyard. Both were right. The trees died faster than men but not by much. Every day the same. American artillery at random intervals. American probes testing defenses. German mortars in response. German machine gun fire keeping Americans pinned. Nobody gained ground. Nobody retreated. Just death on payment plan. Installments paid daily in blood. Becker commanded a squad of 9 men. 5 original members left. For replacements who'd arrived last week. 2 young. No experience. One was 17 years old. Looked 15. Still believed in victory. Still thought the Wehrmacht would push the Americans back. Becker didn't argue with him. Let him believe. Belief kept soldiers fighting. Reality crushed them. Better to delay reality as long as possible. The war was lost. Had been lost since Normandy. Maybe since Kursk. Maybe since Stalingrad. Certainly now. The Americans had endless men, endless equipment, endless artillery shells. Germany had exhausted soldiers defending dirt they'd conquered years ago and would lose next week. But orders were to hold. So they held. And died holding. That was the job. The package lay 20 meters from his foxhole position. Small object partially buried in mud. Metal glinted in rain-filtered light. Becker approached carefully. Mines were everywhere. Both German and American. Planted randomly during nighttime raids. You never knew where they were until someone stepped on one. He'd lost 2 men that way last month. Blown apart by their own mines laid by other German units who hadn't bothered marking locations. But this object was too small for a mine. Wrong shape. He knelt beside it. Picked it up. A C-ration tin folded around something. American origin. That was clear from the English text on the metal. But what was inside? He opened it carefully. Half-expected grenade or small explosive. American tricks sometimes. But no resistance. No click. Just paper and something wrapped in cloth. He unwrapped it. Found a gold wedding ring. Held it up. Read the inscription. Meine Liebe, March 6, 1938. German words. Someone's wedding ring. But whose? And why was it here in an American tin? He unfolded the paper. Read the note written in careful German. The grammar wasn't perfect. Third language German. But the meaning was clear. Friedrich Hartmann. His ring. Found after fighting. Americans wanted family to have it. Sorry for your loss. Becker sat down heavily in mud. Didn't care about getting wet. Didn't care about anything except what he was holding. He knew Friedrich Hartmann. Not well. But knew him. Hartmann had been in Baker Company, 2nd Platoon. Different unit but same division. They'd spoken twice. Once at Field Kitchen 3 weeks ago. Once during reorganization after heavy casualties. Young soldier. Maybe 23. Quiet. Competent. Married recently according to the letters he'd read during mail call. Wife in Bavaria. Talked about her constantly. Showed photographs to anyone who'd listen. Proud. Hopeful. Already planning what they'd do after the war. Hartmann had died 5 days ago during American probe. Becker had heard about it. 6-man patrol sent to test American lines. Only 1 returned. The others killed or missing. Hartmann was listed as missing, presumed dead. No body recovered. That was common. The forest consumed bodies. Buried them in mud and leaves. By spring they'd be gone completely. Absorbed into earth. Forgotten except by families who waited for letters that would never come. But here was proof. Hartmann's ring. Which meant Hartmann was dead. And American soldiers had found him. Had taken time to retrieve his ring. Had risked themselves to throw it back across the line. Had written a note apologizing for his death. Becker couldn't process it. Made no sense within the logic of war. You didn't apologize to the enemy. Didn't treat their dead with respect. Didn't go out of your way to return personal effects. You killed them efficiently and moved forward. That was warfare. But American soldiers had done something different. Had recognized Friedrich Hartmann not as an enemy but as a human being. A husband. Someone loved. Someone missed. Someone whose death mattered. And they'd taken risk to acknowledge that. To honor it. To do what was right despite the insanity surrounding them. Becker called his sergeant over. Feldwebel Schmidt. 42 years old. Career soldier. Survived Russia. Survived France. Survived 6 weeks in Hürtgen. Hard man. Not cruel but realistic. He'd seen too much to be surprised by anything. But when Becker showed him the ring and the note, Schmidt's face changed. The hardness cracked. Something human showed through. He read the note twice. Held the ring up to examine the inscription. Then looked at Becker. The Americans did this? Private First Class Robert Chen never knew for certain whether Friedrich Hartmann's wedding ring reached his widow. The German note said they would try. Lieutenant Harrison promised to investigate through Red Cross channels after the war. But in the moment, in the Hürtgen Forest in November 1944, there was no way to confirm. Just faith that good intentions sometimes worked. That promises were kept. That humanity persisted despite everything trying to destroy it. Chen chose to believe. Easier than the alternative. More tolerable than imagining the ring lost in bureaucracy or theft or indifference. The 28th Infantry Division stayed in Hürtgen Forest until December 8, 24 more days of combat after Chen threw the package. 24 days of the same grinding attrition. Artillery. Probes. Machine gun fire. Casualties. By the time they were relieved, the division had ceased to exist as functional unit. Started Hürtgen with 6,500 men. Left with 900 effectives. The rest were casualties. Killed, wounded, missing, or so psychologically damaged they couldn't fight. The forest consumed them. Every single soldier who entered became something less than they'd been before. Fewer died than were merely erased. Hollowed out. Left walking but empty. Chen survived. Physically. Took shrapnel in the shoulder on November 29 during German counterattack. Nothing serious. Patched up at aid station and returned to duty after 8 days. But something had changed. Not from the wound. From the ring. From the gesture. From the response. He'd spent 4 months learning to see German soldiers as enemies. As targets. As obstacles to be removed. Dehumanization was necessary for killing. You couldn't kill effectively if you thought about the person behind the rifle sights. About their families. Their hopes. Their humanity. So you didn't think about it. You focused on the target. The threat. The mission. You killed efficiently and moved forward. But the ring had broken that. Had reminded him that German soldiers were people. That killing them mattered. That every death was a Friedrich Hartmann. Someone with a wife. Children. A life interrupted. Not just an enemy. A person. And once you remembered that, you couldn't unremember it. Couldn't return to the comfortable numbness of dehumanization. You had to live with the knowledge that every target was someone. Every kill was a loss. Not just for the enemy. For everyone. For the world. For yourself. That weight was heavy. Heavier than combat load. Heavier than fear. It pressed on you constantly. Made every trigger pull harder. Made every day in combat less about winning and more about surviving with some scrap of humanity intact. Chen killed 3 more German soldiers after November 17, knew the exact number because he still counted. But he counted differently now. Before, he'd counted as tallies. After, he counted as names. Gave each one a name in his head. Didn't know their real names. Never would. But assigned names anyway. Friedrich. Hans. Klaus. People he'd killed who'd been people. Not monsters. Not abstractions. Men who'd had families and would be missed. He didn't tell anyone about this. Not Novak. Not Sergeant Dixon. Nobody. It was private. Personal. His way of remembering. His way of carrying the weight. Novak understood without being told. He saw how Chen changed. Slower to fire. More reluctant. Still did his job. Still fought when necessary. But different. Heavier. Novak had changed too. He'd helped throw the package. Had shared the decision. Now shared the consequences. They didn't talk about it. Didn't need to. The understanding was implicit. They'd done something that mattered. Something good. But the price was remembering. Being unable to forget. Living with full weight of what war meant. What killing meant. What being human in inhuman circumstances meant. That price was worth it. But it was still a price. Paid daily in awareness. The German response had surprised them both. They'd thrown the package expecting nothing back. Hoping for the best but expecting silence. The 9-word note changed everything. Proved that German soldiers felt the same way. Recognized the gesture. Valued it. Tried to reciprocate. That meant the dehumanization was mutual. Both sides needed it. Both sides struggled with it. Both sides were human despite the machine of war trying to grind humanity away. That realization was devastating and comforting simultaneously. Devastating because it made killing harder. Comforting because it meant neither side was alone in struggling with what they were forced to do. The incident spread beyond Chen and Novak. Other soldiers heard the story. Versions varied. Some heard Chen through the ring. Others heard it was both of them. Some heard Germans responded. Others heard the ring was lost. Details differed but core remained. American soldiers had done something unexpected. Something decent. Had crossed lines to do what was right. And German soldiers had acknowledged it. That story mattered. Gave soldiers something to hold on to. Proof that humanity survived. That even in Hürtgen Forest, where everything died, some things persisted. Compassion. Decency. Recognition of shared experience. The story became legend within the 28th Division. Probably grew in retelling. Probably acquired details that weren't true. But the core truth remained. Someone had tried. Someone had succeeded. And that was enough. Lieutenant Harrison kept his word. Didn't report the incident officially. Didn't court-martial Chen. But he remembered. In his personal journal, he recorded the full story. Described finding the German response. Described Chen's motivation. Described his own decision to allow it. Wrote about what it meant. About the small spaces where humanity persisted despite orders and regulations and the machinery of war trying to eliminate all such spaces. His journal survived the war. Was donated to military archives in the 1980s. Became part of historical record. Proof that the incident happened. That it mattered. That even in the worst battle of the Western Front, humans found ways to be human. On the German side, the incident affected soldiers differently. Some dismissed it as anomaly. Freak occurrence. Not representative of anything meaningful. The war continued. Men died. That was reality. A single gesture didn't change anything. Others saw it as sign. Proof that Americans weren't monsters. That the enemy was human too. That maybe the war wasn't as black and white as propaganda claimed. That uncertainty was dangerous. Made fighting harder. Made killing more difficult to justify. Better to dismiss it. Better to forget. Some couldn't. The story stayed with them. Haunted them. Made them question. Not loudly. Not openly. But privately. In quiet moments between combat. In letters home that were carefully edited to remove such doubts. In conversations years later when they could finally speak honestly about what they'd experienced. Klaus Becker never forgot. Carried the memory through the rest of the war. Through the retreat across Germany. Through the final weeks when Wehrmacht collapsed. Through surrender. Through prisoner of war camp. Through repatriation. He returned to Hamburg in September 1945. Found his apartment destroyed by Allied bombing. Found his wife evacuated to rural village. Found Germany transformed into something unrecognizable. Everything he'd fought for was gone. Everything he'd believed was proven false. But the memory of the wedding ring remained. That small moment of decency between enemies. That proof that humans could still be human even when everything tried to make them otherwise. He held on to that. Used it to rebuild. Not his life. That was gone. But his belief that humanity was possible. That people could choose right over expedient. That gestures mattered even when they seemed futile. He wrote about it in 1958. Small article for local Hamburg newspaper. Anniversary of war's end. Editorial page asked veterans to share meaningful memories. Most wrote about battles or comrades. Becker wrote about the wedding ring. About American soldiers who'd thrown it back. About his promise to return it. About keeping that promise despite chaos. About what it meant. About why it mattered. The article was 300 words. Simple. Direct. Honest. He didn't expect response. Was writing for himself. To remember. To record. But responses came. From other veterans. From widows. From children of men who died. All saying the same thing. Thank you for remembering. Thank you for showing humanity persisted. Thank you for keeping the promise. One response came from Rosenheim. From Katrin Hartmann. She'd seen the article. Recognized the story. Wrote to Becker confirming she'd received her husband's ring in December 1944. Thanked him for keeping his word. Thanked the American soldiers who'd started it. Asked if Becker knew their names. He didn't. Told her so. But said their names didn't matter. What mattered was the gesture. The acknowledgement. The proof that even enemies could recognize shared humanity. She agreed. Wrote back with longer letter. Described receiving the ring. Her reaction. How it had helped her grieve. How knowing American soldiers had cared had made the loss slightly more bearable. Not easy. Nothing about losing husband was easy. But bearable. That was the word she used. Bearable. The ring had made her husband's death bearable. They corresponded occasionally over the years. Not frequently. Christmas cards. Occasional letters. Updates on life. Katrin remarried in 1952. Had 2 more children. Built new life in Rosenheim. Never forgot Friedrich. Never stopped wearing his ring. Wore it on right hand after remarrying. Memorial. Reminder. Physical connection to man she'd loved. To life they'd planned. To promise made and broken by war. But also connection to the Americans who'd returned it. To Becker who'd kept his word. To everyone who'd chosen humanity over hatred. That mattered more over time. As wounds healed and memories softened, that moment of decency became more important. Proof that war didn't destroy everything. That some things survived. That humanity persisted. In 1984, a German historian researching Hürtgen Forest interviewed Katrin. She was 63 years old. Widow, mother, grandmother. Normal life in normal German town. But she remembered the ring. Remembered the story. Told the historian everything. Showed him the letters. The American note. The Wehrmacht notification. The correspondence with Becker. The historian was writing book about Hürtgen. Wanted to include the story. Asked permission. She agreed. But requested one thing. Find the American soldiers. Find out who they were. Give them credit. Thank them properly. The historian promised to try. He succeeded partially. Through American military archives, he traced the incident to the 28th Infantry Division. Found Lieutenant Harrison's journal. Found references to Private Chen and Private Novak. But by 1984, Harrison was dead. Heart attack in 1971. Chen was harder to locate. Common surname. Poor record keeping. Finally found in 1985 through VA hospital records. Robert Chen, San Francisco. 64 years old. Retired postal worker. Contacted him. Asked about Hürtgen. About November 1944. About throwing package across German lines. Chen remembered everything. Told the whole story. Was surprised anyone cared 40 years later. Was surprised the ring had reached Hartmann's widow. Thought it probably got lost. Learning otherwise mattered. Made the whole thing real in ways it hadn't been during war. Made the risk worthwhile. Made the gesture significant. The historian arranged meeting. 1986, Rosenheim, Germany. Katrin Hartmann and Robert Chen. First time they'd met despite being connected since 1944. She was 65. He was 65. Both gray. Both marked by time. Both carrying memories of people they'd never met but who connected them. Friedrich Hartmann for her. A dead German soldier for him. Same person. Different meanings. But linked by gold ring and promises kept and humanity acknowledged. They talked for 3 hours. About the war. About losing and finding. About carrying weight. About surviving with humanity intact. She thanked him. Properly. Face to face. Told him receiving the ring had mattered. Had helped. Had proven that not all Americans were monsters. That not all soldiers were killers. That some were just people trying to do right in impossible circumstances. He accepted her thanks awkwardly. Said he'd just done what seemed right. What anyone would do. She disagreed. Said most wouldn't. Said choosing humanity required courage. Said he'd had that courage. Said she'd never forget. He told her about carrying the weight. About counting names after November 17th. About Friedrich, Hans, Klaus. The men he'd killed who'd been people. She listened. Didn't judge. Didn't absolve. Just listened. When he finished, she said something that surprised him. Said Friedrich would have done the same thing. Would have tried to return the ring if positions were reversed. Would have recognized shared humanity. Would have chosen right over easy. Said Robert Chen and Friedrich Hartmann were the same kind of person. That's why the gesture mattered. Because it was something Friedrich would have understood. Would have valued. Would have reciprocated. They kept in touch after that. Letters every few months. Christmas cards. Updates on families. Chen came to Germany twice more before Katrin died in 1994. They talked about things they couldn't discuss with others. About war. About surviving. About remembering. About carrying weight that never got lighter. About finding meaning in senseless events. About small gestures that echoed across decades. They'd both been shaped by November 17, 1944. Both carried pieces of that day forward. Both understood what the other had lost and gained. That understanding created bond that transcended former enemy status. Transcended language and culture. Just two people marked by same moment recognizing each other across the divide. Robert Chen died in San Francisco in 2003 at age 82. Natural causes. Old age and complications from war injuries that had accumulated over decades. He'd had good life after the war. Married. 3 children. Career as postal worker. Active in Chinese American community. Volunteer at VA hospital helping younger veterans process their own experiences. Normal life built on foundation of survival. But the war never left him. None of the men who'd been in Hürtgen could forget it. The forest stayed with them. The killing stayed. The weight stayed. Until death finally lifted it. His children found documents when sorting his effects. War records. Letters. Photographs. And a small notebook. Personal journal kept irregularly through combat and occasionally afterward. The journal contained the full story of November 17, 1944. Described finding the ring. The decision to return it. Throwing the package. German response. All written in Chen's careful handwriting. His daughter, Emily, read it and wept. She'd known her father was veteran. Knew he'd fought in Europe. But he'd never talked about it. Never shared details. The journal was revelation. Showed side of him she'd never known. The young man who'd faced death daily but still chose humanity. Who'd risked himself for principle. Who'd carried weight of killing but refused to become merely a killer. She contacted the historian who'd arranged the 1986 meeting. He still lived in Hamburg. Was now retired. She sent him copies of the journal. Asked if story was true. All of it. He confirmed everything. Had documentation. Katrin's letters. Becker's article. Lieutenant Harrison's journal. American military records. All corroborating. All proving the incident happened exactly as Chen had described. He asked permission to publish the journal. To include it in second edition of his book about Hürtgen. Emily agreed. But requested something in return. Help finding James Novak. Her father's war buddy. The other soldier who'd helped throw the package. She wanted to thank him. To tell him her father had never forgotten. To preserve their shared story. Novak was easier to find. VA records again. James Novak, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. 81 years old. Steel worker, retired. Widower. 3 children, 7 grandchildren. Living in nursing home. Still sharp mentally despite physical decline. Emily called him. Introduced herself as Chen's daughter. Explained about the journal. About wanting to meet. Novak was silent for a long time. Then asked single question. Did your father keep counting? She didn't understand. Counting what? Novak explained. About Chen giving names to men he'd killed after November 17th. About carrying weight differently. About remembering rather than tallying. Emily read through the journal again more carefully. Found references. Friedrich, Hans, Klaus. Others. 14 names total. German soldiers Chen had killed after throwing the ring. All given names. All remembered. All carried. She told Novak yes. Her father had kept counting. Had kept naming. Had carried them all. Good, Novak said. That means it mattered. That means the ring worked. We were trying to stay human. He managed it. That's all we could do. They met in Pittsburgh 3 months later. Emily, her 2 siblings, and James Novak. In nursing home common room that smelled of antiseptic and old age. They talked for 4 hours. Novak shared his memories of the war. Of Chen. Of November 17th. Of throwing the package together. Of believing it probably got lost. Of learning years later it had worked. Of what that meant. About how the gesture had changed him too. Made him less willing to dehumanize. Made killing harder. Made surviving harder. But made being human possible. That trade was worth it. Emily showed him photographs. Chen's life after the war. Family. Children. Grandchildren. Career. Normal peaceful existence. Novak studied each photo carefully. Smiled at some. Teared up at others. When he finished, he said something Emily never forgot. We were 23 years old. We'd been killing people for 4 months. We were exhausted and scared and didn't think we'd survive. But your father chose humanity anyway. Chose to see the enemy as people. Chose to do what was right when everything else was wrong. That's who he was. That's who he stayed. The war didn't destroy that. I'm glad. Some of us didn't make it through with our humanity intact. He did. Tell people that. Tell them his story. Tell them it's possible to survive hell and still be decent. The historian's book was published in 2005. Second edition of his Hürtgen Forest study. Included full chapter on the wedding ring incident. Used Chen's journal as primary source. Included Friedrich Hartmann's letters. Klaus Becker's article. Lieutenant Harrison's journal entries. German military records. American military records. Everything. Comprehensive documentation of single incident that lasted maybe 20 minutes but echoed across 6 decades. The chapter was titled The Wedding Ring, Humanity in Hürtgen. It won historical writing awards. Was excerpted in military history journals. Became one of most cited incidents in studies of moral behavior during combat. Not because it was unique. But because it was documented. Proven. Real. Verifiable instance of soldiers choosing humanity over expedience. Educational institutions used it. Military academies included it in ethics courses. High schools taught it in Holocaust and World War II units. Universities analyzed it in psychology and sociology classes. The story spread. Became known beyond historians and veterans. Became part of cultural memory about the war. One of the stories people told to prove humanity persisted even in darkest moments. Even in Hürtgen Forest, which consumed everything, some things survived. Some gestures mattered. Some choices reverberated forward. This was one. Veterans responded to the story. Hundreds of letters to the historian. To Emily Chen. To Novak before he died in 2007. All saying variations of same thing. Thank you for sharing this. Thank you for showing we weren't all monsters. Thank you for proving some of us tried to stay human. Many veterans shared their own stories. Similar incidents. Different circumstances but same theme. Moments when they'd chosen humanity. When they'd recognized enemy as people. When they'd done what was right despite everything. Those stories had stayed private. Locked away. Never shared. Reading about the wedding ring gave them permission to remember. To speak. To acknowledge their own struggles with morality during war. One letter came from German veteran. Erich Müller. 84 years old. Living in Frankfurt. He'd been in Hürtgen. Different division than Becker but same forest. Same nightmare. He wrote that he'd always wondered if Americans were human. If they felt anything. If they struggled with killing the way he did. Reading about the wedding ring answered his question. Yes. They felt. They struggled. They were human. Just like him. Just like everyone. The enemy wasn't different species. Just people on other side of line drawn by politicians and generals. People who suffered same way. Killed same way. Died same way. That understanding had come too late during war. But better late than never. Better to know before death that shared humanity was real. That he hadn't been alone in struggling. That others had fought same internal battles. That some had chosen right. That decency persisted. In 2014, German military erected memorial in Hürtgen Forest. Black granite stone. Names of all German soldiers killed there. 24,000 names. Too many to read. But at bottom, separate plaque. Small bronze square. Inscribed with 8 words in German and English. Humanity persisted even here. November 17, 1944. Below that, 3 names, Friedrich Hartmann. Robert Chen. Klaus Becker. The soldier who died. The soldier who returned his ring. The soldier who kept the promise. Trinity of humanity in place where humanity was systematically destroyed. The memorial received criticism. Some said it was inappropriate. That honoring American soldier on German memorial was wrong. That mixing enemy names diminished sacrifice. Most disagreed. Said the memorial was exactly right. Said Hürtgen Forest was where enemies had recognized shared humanity. Where gesture across lines had proven all soldiers were human. Where promises were kept despite war trying to make such promises impossible. That memory needed preservation. That story needed telling. That the memorial served its purpose. American military added their own memorial in 2016. At Arlington National Cemetery. Small section dedicated to World War II moral exemplars. Soldiers who demonstrated extraordinary character under extreme circumstances. Robert Chen's name was included. Bronze plaque describing the incident. Noting that he died in 2003 but his actions in 1944 had reverberated forward. Had influenced thousands of soldiers. Had proven that humanity could survive even in worst conditions. Had shown that small gestures mattered. That choosing right over easy was possible. That morality persisted when everything conspired to destroy it. James Novak's children attended the memorial dedication. They'd known their father was veteran but, like Chen's children, had known few details. He'd talked even less than Chen. Had kept the war locked away deeper. Had never mentioned the wedding ring incident. Learning about it after his death was revelation. Showed side of him they'd never known. The young man who'd helped his friend do what was right. Who'd risked himself for principle. Who'd understood that staying human was the real fight. Not against Germans. Against dehumanization. Against becoming something less than human through killing. That fight was harder than combat. More dangerous. More likely to be lost. But more important. Chen and Novak had fought it together. Had won. Had survived with humanity intact. That victory mattered more than any battle. The wedding ring itself was donated to United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in 2018. Katrin Hartmann's daughter, Maria, made the donation. Her mother had died in 1994. Had worn the ring until death. Had preserved it alongside letters and documents. Maria inherited everything. Kept them private until reading about the memorial at Arlington. Then realized the ring belonged in museum. Belonged where people could see it. Touch it. Understand what it represented. Not just Friedrich Hartmann's marriage. Not just his death. But the gesture across lines. The promise kept. The humanity acknowledged. The proof that even in worst moments, people could choose decency. The museum accepted. Created special display. Small glass case. The ring on velvet. Inscription visible. Beside it, the American note. The German response. Both preserved. Both aged but readable. Above, photographs. Friedrich Hartmann in Wehrmacht uniform. Katrin Hartmann on wedding day. Robert Chen in American uniform. Klaus Becker decades after war. The soldiers connected by single gesture. The woman who received the promise kept. All together. All remembered. All honored for choosing humanity when easier to choose hatred. The display includes explanation. Detailed history of November 17, 1944. Description of Hürtgen Forest. Context of combat. Details of the incident. Outcomes. Legacy. Full story preserved for future generations. Hundreds of thousands of visitors see it annually. School groups. Veterans. Historians. Random tourists. All stopping. All reading. All affected. Comments in visitor log reflect universal response. Variations of same theme. Thank you for showing this. Thank you for proving humanity persists. Thank you for reminding us that small gestures matter. That choosing right is possible. That morality survives when people choose to maintain it. Veterans bring their grandchildren. Point to the display. Tell stories of their own wars. Vietnam. Iraq. Afghanistan. Different conflicts. Same struggles. Same questions about humanity. Same need to prove they stayed decent despite circumstances. The wedding ring answers those questions. Proves it's possible. Shows the way. Not through grand gestures. Through small ones. Through recognizing shared humanity. Through doing what's right when everything else is wrong. That lesson transcends specific war. Applies to all conflicts. All situations where humans must navigate between duty and morality. Between following orders and staying human. In 2024, 80 years after the incident, a documentary film was produced. The Wedding Ring, a story from Hürtgen. Used the historical documentation. Interviewed family members. Showed the memorials. Examined the broader implications. Asked fundamental questions. How do soldiers maintain humanity during combat? What makes some choose decency while others choose expedience? Why do small gestures matter when surrounded by large-scale horror? The film provided no easy answers. But showed through the wedding ring incident that answers existed. That humanity could persist. That individuals had agency even in circumstances designed to eliminate agency. That choosing right was always possible. Always meaningful. Always worth the cost. The film won awards at military film festivals. Was screened at West Point, Annapolis, Air Force Academy. Became required viewing in military ethics courses. Generated discussions among officer candidates about moral behavior under stress. About maintaining values when challenged by extreme circumstances. About the responsibility to stay human even when war tried to make you otherwise. Those discussions were exactly what Robert Chen and James Novak had needed in November 1944. Had needed but didn't have. Had to figure out themselves. The film ensured future soldiers wouldn't face those questions alone. Would have examples. Would know that others had struggled. Had chosen right. Had survived. That knowledge was invaluable. The ending of the documentary shows the gold wedding ring in its museum case. Camera stays on it for 30 seconds. No narration. Just the ring. The inscription. Meine Liebe, March 6, 1938. June 3, 1938. Summer day. Two people making promises. Building futures. Starting lives. Not knowing war was coming. Not knowing those lives would be interrupted. Not knowing the ring would become symbol of humanity's persistence. But the ring survived. The promises survived. The humanity survived. Despite everything. Despite war and death and hatred and horror. Small circle of gold proved that some things couldn't be destroyed. Some choices couldn't be undone. Some gestures echoed across decades. Across generations. Across the vast distance between November 1944 and now. The final frame is black screen with white text. Friedrich Hartmann, 1921–1944. Husband, son, soldier. Remembered. Robert Chen, 1921–2003. Husband, father, veteran. Honored. Klaus Becker, 1913–1989. Soldier, citizen, witness. Acknowledged. Katrin Hartmann, 1919–1994. Wife, mother, keeper of promises. In November 1944, in the worst place on earth, humans chose to be human. That choice still matters. That choice always matters. The screen fades. The story ends. But the wedding ring remains. In its glass case. In the museum. In Washington, D.C. In America. Far from Hürtgen Forest. Far from the mud and blood and death. But carrying all of it forward. Bearing witness. Proving that even in darkness, some light persists. Even in hatred, some love survives. Even in war, some peace is possible. Through small gestures. Through choosing right. Through refusing to let circumstances destroy what makes us human. Through remembering that the enemy is people too. Through acting on that remembrance despite everything. That's what the wedding ring means. Not just a marriage. Not just a promise kept. But humanity's refusal to surrender to inhumanity. The insistence that even in hell, heaven's possible. The acknowledgement that we're all connected. All human. All trying to survive with some piece of ourselves intact. And when we recognize that. When we act on that recognition. When we choose compassion over convenience, empathy over expedience, humanity over hatred. When we do that, we win. Not the battle. Not the war. But something more important. We win the fight to stay human. To remain ourselves. To prove that circumstances don't define us. Our choices do. And some choices echo forward. Forever. Like a gold wedding ring thrown across a battle line on November 17, 1944, in a German forest where everything died but one small piece of humanity survived.